All right, guys, welcome to the podcast. To start things off, I want to tell you about our brand new sponsor. This week, we finally, actually, it was like a week and a half ago, we got our product in from Blue Crown Aquatics. And I got to say, I was extremely impressed with the shrimp. I've seen a lot of shrimp. Jim, you farm shrimp. But these shrimp were particularly awesome. We got see-through white crystal shrimp. I've never seen them. I've seen red crystal shrimp. I've seen black crystal shrimp. I've even seen some weird blue crystal shrimp. But where it's completely glass see-through and then white bands, it was mind-blowing. And they have these King Kong shrimp that they sent us that are in your tank that are doing pretty darn well.
Doing very well. Did a little water change last night. Did a little feeding, and they've got such personality. They come right up to the glass and go, "Hey, how you doing? Feed me."
So before Jim and I really wanted to sponsor anybody, we wanted to do our homework and vetting, and we're proud to say that these guys have certainly shined on their quality of shrimp. So give them a try, bluecrownaquatics.com, and we're here for a promo code. Use promo code AquariumGuys, that's guys with an S, for free shipping on any purchase, no matter what it is.
Free shipping?
Free shipping. Now, it's not just shipping like on Amazon.com. This is fish, so they have to do, heat packs, whatever they need to do to get it shipped, and there's a major expense in shipping your product. So for free shipping, Aquarium Guys is the promo code.
That is incredible, because shipping is usually half the price of your order.
Easy. So use that promo code, and then on top of it, to celebrate our new sponsorship, they decided to give us some $25 gift certificates that we're going to raffle off in a month's time. So we're going to have on our website a form to sign up on aquariumguyspodcast.com. On the bottom, sign in. You'll have your name, number, address, email, so we can contact you when you win. And that is $25 gift certificates to Blue Crown Aquatics. Thank you so much, guys.
And we got 4 of them, correct?
We do have 4 to give away, so certainly put it in. The odds are in your favor.
Absolutely. And so we want to thank again Blue Crown Aquatics for stepping up and taking us on as a partner.
We're going to have their CEO on the podcast here soon. Robbie Chan just won a national shrimp competition, so we'll get him on the podcast. But until then, thank you, and use the promo code, sign up, and we're ready to give those promo codes out in 1 month's time.
And if you have any shrimp questions, send us an email, send us a text, send us up some smoke signals. We'll be happy to get them all set up so we can ask Robbie when we get him on our podcast. And so we have a bunch of questions ready for him that you want to know about.
And don't forget about the charity Ohio Fish Rescues. We just had Ohio Fish Rescue on last podcast. If you didn't listen to it, go back, listen to that podcast. It was super fun. Those guys are crazy, and they love fish.
They are more than crazy. Those guys are hilarious. It was one of my favorite podcasts we did. I thought I was going to pee my pants. We were laughing so hard at the very end. And what you hear on the podcast is only a fraction of what we talked to them about. These guys have got so much information, so many great stories. We're going to have them on again. So look back to Big Rich and Ohio Fish Rescue if you haven't heard it yet.
OhioFishRescue.com. Donate money, buy a T-shirt, but above all else, call them and tell them you love them.
Tell them you love them. Oh, they love those phone calls.
They love them.
Do it about midnight.
All right, let's kick the episode.
Welcome to the Aquarium Guys podcast with your hosts, Jim Colby and Rob Zolson.
All right, guys, welcome to the podcast. I'm super excited. I'm a bit of a fish nerd because I do a podcast, but above all else, I got to say there's like a couple people that is on our list for the future that we never thought we could get, like Gary Lang, I think is how you pronounce his name. He's the king of rainbow fish.
Yes.
We just had a passing of the discus king,
Jack Watley.
And there's some high prestigious people in the industry, but we are so graced and lucky to have the Pseudacanthicus king, Mr. Jim Kitchen. How are you doing today?
Not too bad. Yourself?
Oh, we're like I don't know, kids going to the first concert ever.
It's Christmas, man.
It's Christmas.
It is.
And you made it happen for us.
Well, I'm glad to be here. Glad to help you out and give you whatever answers you're trying to find.
Awesome. So this is a shout out to one of our listeners that called in and sent us an email saying they wanted a Pleco podcast. So I literally can't get anybody else
We can't do any better than this. No.
than Mr. Jim Kitchen. So just a quick round of introductions. Jim Colby's my co-host.
How you doing out there? And welcome to the show.
And Adam Elnashar. How you doing, buddy?
Hi, pretty good. How about you guys?
We are dippity doing, buddy.
Dippity doo-doo.
So, again, we mentioned Blue Crown Aquatics at the beginning of the podcast as advertisement, but for real, we have $25 gift certificates to give out. Please sign up on the website. But we're still getting a great number of questions. We got a few more this week. We have one of them from Mr. Smith. He reached out to us because he's trying to import fish on his own and realizes that he needs something called a transshipper. Now, this is not the only person that's messaged us recently about transshippers. So the idea, just to answer a couple questions for the audience listening in, if you're trying to import a fish, you can contact a wholesaler or a distributor that works with companies like we had Seegers Farms on the air. They will import in for you and take care of all the regulatory needs. Otherwise, you have to go and take your tropical fish into a registered transshipper. That's the only legal way you can bring in international fish from certain countries in, because you have to check the stock, make sure it's not coming with anything else, and make sure your product's in a great shape. So he's been looking for a transshipper that accepts for Taiwan. So we gave him a recommendation, but if you're a transshipper listening to this podcast, we're getting a lot more people calling in for a lot of these unique specialty countries, and we'd like to help some of our listeners. So if you're a transshipper, please email us, call us at the podcast. We'd love to be able to distribute your information so people can import fish, because we did not know that this is really a hidden gem in our community. So thank you, Mr. Smith, for messaging us, and hopefully our recommendation works out for you. Other things is, of course, our merch store. If we still get, as much as it pains me, the more I talk about it, the more I regret, because I have orders coming in. But if we get 20 unique customers going to our merch store, and I will still buy the crop top and take a picture for you, sir.
I will buy a T-shirt so you don't put on the crop top. Honestly.
But I give the audience what they want.
The audience is not seeing what I'm seeing here, Rob. I'm sitting in front of you. Nobody wants to see you in a crop top.
Hey, you're the one that gave me 8 loaves of bread, all right?
15. Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm going to keep this short so we can get right in with Jim, because I'm super excited. So, Jim, thanks again for coming on the podcast. We have so many questions for you, but I really want this podcast to be a topic, covering Plecos as a whole. But again, your specialty is I believe it's genus Pseudacanthicus.
Correct.
Excellent. So let's just start with background on you first. So when did you start getting into the tropical fish hobby?
I was pretty much born into it. When when I was young, we always had tanks in the in our basement, and the old stainless steel rims with the slate bottoms and everything else. But yeah, I mean, from as early as memory, we always had tanks in the basement. My dad was in the Coast Guard, so he was always interested in the water. And the only time I did not have aquariums was when I was in college, because I was gone too long. And I immediately got out of college, and before I got married or anything else like that, I had another 125-gallon tank in my apartment, and started off from there again. So it's just something that's always been part of my life.
There's so many people that start off with small tanks and then just keep on going and going, and that's how you know it's passion. We were talking with Big Rich, and even heck, my story, Jim's story, everybody just keeps starting with the small tank, and it's not enough. It's just never enough.
Never enough.
What made you, I'm assuming the Pseudacanthicus, of course, is your favorite fish.
As far as like Plecos, I like other fish. Some people get so focused on one, only one, that they lose sight of, the beauty is of the others. I've had discus, I've bred them, I've done quarries, I've done cardinals, done, bettas. Bettas, those were the first thing I did back in the 80s, I think it was. So it's just, but I focused on the pseudos because it was basically a challenge. So when David said, hey, no one has spawned these in the world yet, why don't you go if you're so good, why don't you give it a shot? And yes, we've got that whole thing on Pseudacanthicus going. The cactus Plecos, the spiny ones.
That was the first thing you started researching?
Yeah, because I was looking for something. I was looking for a new challenge, and Chris Bennis, a good friend of mine, was a smart aleck, and said, "Well, hey, I know previously he says, well, hey, if you're so good, why don't you spawn them? No one else has, so that's what got it. Started looking at them, and back at the time in the like the 08, 09, there wasn't a whole lot being imported at the time from Brazil, so just finding some was kind of hard back then, and just started from there.
So literally started getting a reputation because you had skills for breeding. They said, well, why don't you give it a try? And clearly you had a knack for this, and it just went downhill from there.
Pretty much.
Or uphill, depending on how
Or
you look
uphill.
at it. Exactly. So it was a challenge from a buddy that said, if you're so dang good, then you go ahead and try it, and then you
Showed up the world.
You showed off the world, exactly.
Yeah, well, I was thinking I was about 4th or 5th by the time I got the adult pair to spawn. There was a couple over in England and in Greece that did it first, and then there's some people over in Germany and a couple over in Sweden, and then I was in the top 5, I'd say, for doing the 114s or the leopardus, or the ones that look like the leopard spots.
So before we go too far, I just wanted to do some basics for a lot of the beginner listeners. So the Pleco variety is defined by an L series of numbering scheme. And the L numbers started off, just a few, and now they have a massive list that's published online. Even Wikipedia only goes up to L600, but that list has been modified, am I not correct, to include a lot more than just 600 varieties of Pleco.
I've actually lost track of the number, to be honest. It's been exploding so much again in the last couple of years because every time they find a new river with the Pleco, even though it may look like one they've already found, they're trying to put a unique placeholder for it in case it is different. But yeah, you are right. I mean, that's why it's like with the zebra Plecos, the 46s and all those sub numbers. There's an argument over whether this one's a 172, this one's a 173. I'm just throwing out some numbers because they all look just a little bit different. So it's gone from a carefully controlled numbering system to sort of like an open range right now.
Well, when you keep finding species, you got to categorize them somehow. But the L number system is a scientific classification for these type of quote-unquote catfish. But this was started from what I can find is about 88. Is that correct? 1988?
Somewhere about there, yeah. There's actually two that were started. There was L, and then there was the LDA numbers. But the publisher of the L numbers had a larger population than the LDA had sort of caught on rather than the smaller one.
So it was originally published trying to categorize Plecos from a German magazine called DATZ. I'm not going to try to even pronounce what that was supposed to stand for, but again, that's really where it took off, is the Aquarium and Terrarium magazine. Since then, it's now definitely the common name because they have pet shop names. Like a lot of the tetras will be called something like a hockey stick Pleco, or not hockey stick, tetra.
The penguin tetra. Right?
Or called penguin tetra.
Yep.
So there's a lot of pet store naming schemes that do not follow any type of structure. So this was really the integrity of keeping Plecos in a line. And I think I was talking with you this last week, and you sent me a Pleco, and it was 4 digits long. L
10,000.
Yeah, L2464, and that actually is a natural hybrid between we used to call them a flame Pleco. It's the 24, which I think it's called the Batinga now, and the Hystrix. So you took two very similar Pseudacanthicus, and you end up with this mega monster that is just gorgeous. So no one knew what to do with hybrids. So someone just came up with the scheme of, let's take the two numbers and throw it together as a number. So that's not even in any book anywhere. That's more or less a trade placeholder right now.
Now,
and in fact, that actually those hybrids do exist.
So you say natural hybrid. Is that something that is found in nature then? Or is that something that somebody's put?
Yeah, both of them are in the same river systems.
Oh, okay. That totally makes sense now.
Yeah. Usually what happens is these things are so expensive and so rare that they go directly over to China or Japan. And the one I think I sent you was about a $5,000 fish. So
that's crazy.
No in the U.S. is going to see that fish for a long time.
Not unless it's stuffed in a museum. Unfortunately. Yeah, that's a lot of money. What is an average price? I know we were watching on your on TV or on the YouTube. You do the cactus plecos. What is an average price of a cactus pleco for people that wanted to try this? I mean, I know it's a 3 to 5 year commitment just to get them up to adulthood, but can you tell me?
I mean, it's all over the board. I mean, that was one of the big goals that I had was breeding these plecos was to have a stock available in the United States that people could get for a reasonable price. And I mean, you can look like a 24, 25 flame or a scarlet, and you're talking $250 for a 6-inch fish, on the open market.
Wow.
And for me, I promised everyone I would sell all of my fry at 2 inches, or all my juveniles at under 2.5 inches for under $100. So like when I went to Cataclysm, not Cataclysm, sorry, the other one, on the East Coast.
I guess I'm not familiar.
So again, that's the other promise. So your prices all over the place right now, depending on which ones you're trying to get.
So again, more deep dive in the topic from a beginner standpoint. Plecos are traditionally sold in the hobby and were most commonly sold as like the Florida Pleco that was sold at Walmart for so many years. Now Walmart is no longer selling fish, but the most popular Pleco that we see in common trade is the bristlenose Pleco because they have a nice appetite for a range diet, and they stay around 4 inches, so they fit in a lot of different aquarium environments. But I'm going to go with just a couple of the beginner questions before we go into super deep dives. We had, why should no one buy what we call Florida Pleco unless they have a large tank? So how large is like some of the largest Plecos you've ever seen?
I had a 24-inch Florida Pleco. In one of my tanks for a while, I got it I traded it, got it with the tank that I traded in. And you're right, there's nothing you can do. They just eat everything in sight. They don't look all that pretty in my eyes, and what are we going to do with them? By the same token, that's one of the reasons why the Pseudacanthicus species is not, or genus is not widely imported on a lot of them, is because they tend to get larger as well, like 12 inches to 14. And you need at least like a 125-gallon tank to comfortably house them, and that's a pretty big commitment for most people.
So some of these Plecos that we've seen even done in farms, they've been the length of our arms for the Florida Plecos. So we get, as far as rescues, and I think we talked a little bit about this with Big Rich, we get in quite a few of these massive Plecos because they put them in a 10 or 20-gallon tank, and now they've literally extended the length where they're curving inside the tank and can't turn around. Keeping to 4 inches is the place you want to be, but let's talk about basics of care for Pseudacanthicus or any other Pleco. So when you're doing this, what diet do you use to, number one, encourage breeding, but also just for general youth care?
Well, for me, being practical and like somewhat like an easy doing it person, I like to prepare foods. I've used Hikari a lot, and I used Thera a lot for the pellets. And then Hikari's got this beautiful thing called Massivore pellets. And each pellet is, I think it's 2.8 goldfish in protein. And when you get to some of these larger pseudas, you're looking at maybe 8 to 10 pellets per adult per day when you're getting into breeding shape. So, it's a lot of that. If there's go live fish or fish fillets, it'd be a whole lot more waste in the tank than getting them in a commercially prepared food.
So some of the people that I've talked to, firmly believe that these are, essentially vegetarians or herbivores, but instead they are, I forget the term for it, but they are feed on omnivorous diet of things that are decaying. So decaying litter, wood, algae, dead corpses in the rivers or waters, but they do have protein, and you using Massivore pellets really does prove that. It's not just algae wafers. You feed them exclusively. You give them a high protein diet.
Yeah, actually, when you get a little bit larger, if you get off from an algae wafer or if off from meat, they will ignore the algae wafer. They're primarily carnivores who are made into omnivores when there's not enough food available.
So when they go to the buffet and the prime rib is out, then they'll have a salad.
If they have a little bit of room left over.
That's a good analogy.
So what do you feed the fry when they're hatched?
Well, I used to start off with the traditional way of, baby brine and, some of the cultures and things like that. Well, I found these buggers were just way too hungry and a little bit larger to deal with that. And I was starving them, so I just went with a Thera A granule and just, made it into a little bit of paste. And for about 4 days, they're already gnawing on the granules themselves. Just let them go after it. So again, just meat. Forget that green stuff.
So what kind of growth do you get on a fish when it's already eaten pellets at 4 days? How fast do they grow? I mean, are you getting some substantial growth that first few months?
Yeah, and for me, I was usually targeting 7 to 8 months to go from a hatch to selling them, to like 2.25, 2.5 inches. But that requires a lot of water changes. People think about, the food as the input when there's also these trace minerals and trace elements that come with the water. And so you need both, in combination to get the optimal growth.
And in your system, from what I was watching, you have a drip system in most of your tanks, correct?
Yeah.
And how many gallons do you change out per day or per hour? How do you measure that?
For a while I was changing 200 gallons a day automatically.
Now, and how many tanks are you running in your fish room?
Well, I had five 190s. I had like 4 125s, and then I had for the smaller fish, grow fish. I have 30s and 50s, but all told, I was up to I think 2,800 gallons worth of tank water and 300 gallons of storage water. And
you have a designated fish room. Is it in your home then?
Yeah, it's two lower levels of my basement.
Okay.
I have a quad with an extra step in it, so it makes it kind of interesting.
Interesting. And so you live in Michigan, correct?
Yeah.
And so you're dealing with the same type of weather we're dealing with over here in Minnesota. And so you're trying to keep those tanks warm. And I noticed that you had some really cool heating options and how you double down to make sure that you don't have any problems with heat. Can you tell us about that? Well,
the traditional one heater per tank, and they would get stuck on or stuck off, and they would freeze or they would boil. And so I then went to using two heaters, and then they kind of worked better. But I ended up finally going with a separate controller for the temperature. And looking at the market at the time, there was really nothing very effective or reliable in the hobby. So I actually went with a heating and cooling commercial grade, thermostat control for $50. So I do there is I've got that with the controller. I would wire it up with an extension cord. I'm just going to put the extension cord in the middle, plug in the power on one side, and then on the coming out, I'd have the power strip with an on-off switch. So I could, if I need to turn off the heaters, I just throw the switch and everything was done. It was very visually oriented, so you could see if the heat was on, the light was on. That makes a lot of sense.
So I have one other loaded question from one of our viewers about Plecos. They're so curious they know that there's a lot of different varieties, but they still don't understand why Plecos are so expensive. I've had a lot of people reach out to us for zebra Plecos, for instance, and the price of those have skyrocketed and are finally now beginning to stabilize because they're being bred at supply in the United States.
There's some commercial breeders that have stepped forward.
At a high level, we know that the reason why certain Plecos cost so much is because there's only some that exist. But how many different rivers or subsidiaries have Pseudacanthicus or other breeds of Pleco?
You'd be astounded when I started doing the additional research of trying to figure out how to breed the other pseudos, because again I start off with the Leopardos, which is the 114. There's literally 20, 25 other known variants. They just, some of them don't have numbers yet. So, but you just can't, give the same parameters and have the same effects. So, I started looking through, and you'd find, here's one from that river, and it's just widespread. I mean, they're still finding new fish every day in Brazil. So it's kind of hard to say just how many there are. But I know, for example, there's 6 different. Drawing the blanks there. There's 6 variations of the 114s and the 600s. Just go to a different river, go to a different spot, dip your net, and there they are. So the Pseudacanthicus is throughout all the entire Amazon basin. They're all over the place.
So, my wife's a nurse, and we were watching watching you on YouTube on Ted's Fish Room, and if people haven't seen that, I highly encourage you to watch this. It was so interesting, but you do DNA testing on fish and doing mouth swabs.
Yeah.
On fish, and I'm going, and my wife looks at me, and she's a nurse, and she looks at me and just nods her head and goes, "Crazy, man, crazy."
I was really thankful for the crazy people around the world who sent me samples. It's not the easiest thing to grab these guys with these big old spines and not get your hand impaled on them, but people did it.
And so, what have you found out? You found out that many of these fish in the river are related, but still different.
Yeah, basically, I gave a presentation at CatCon. Was it 4 years ago now? And there was four distinct subgroups of the Pseudacanthicus. There's the black ones with white spots and browns. You've got the plain muddy looking ones, and then you've got the ones that look like they look like the pumas and the cats. I usually call them the cats because some of the patterns look like leopard pets. Some of them look like panther spots. So it's just sort of juggling, naming each one after some big
jungle animal,
African cat or whatever. And so they fall into those four groups. The interesting thing is one of them, which are one of the most popular, which is they call them the Titanics and the Typhoons and the Patinga and the Scarlets. Those are the ones that be the real big ones in the really bright orange color. It turns out they're an undescribed genus. They actually are not part of the Pseudacanthicus genus, and you have to look very deep to actually see that. So that's a big surprise that people are just trying to understand.
So what makes them part of the Pseudacanthicus genus and something different?
Physically, the difference is all of the unique group have got long trailers on their fins. People love the trailers, like the one video clip I sent you where I had a 4-inch Titanic with a 5-inch trailers on the fins.
Absolutely,
beautiful.
So all of those with the long trailers are there. They're in the same type of water. They all tend to be the larger ones, like the hystrix, which grow to be 3 feet long. So they're the larger ones, the heavier ones, the bulkier ones. But then if you actually look at their eating habits, they're slightly different on their eating habits. And then because I was lucky enough to have 17 different species in my basement at one time, I could look at all of them side by side by side, and you can start to see obvious differences. Where if you just look at a picture, you can't tell the differences. And the interesting is which are the hardest to spawn are the 24s, the 25s, the Titanics, and the Typhoons. In aquariums, there's some guys in Singapore that are trying to have some great success with it, but they're very, very hard to do compared to cactus pleco or a polka dot Pseuda. So I think there's enough information to prove both genetically and taxonomy, and then also habitat-wise, that they are distinctly different groups.
So let's talk about some of your accomplishments that you've done. So again, you got into Plecos as a more or less a dare. How did you try to breed them? And clearly it just worked out for you. But let's go from there. What did you do a lot of scientific work for Pseudacanthicus? Tell us about what you've accomplished in all this time.
Well, I wanted to learn as much about them as I could, and then there's other thing is you don't work in a vacuum, as you pointed out, and there's a lot of people in in Holland and Sweden and Norway. Christopher Forsander, he was interested in them before I was, and so we used to talk quite a bit, and we compared notes. And then there's Ole Poulsen from drawing a blank. He's gonna kill me for this.
That's okay.
It's all right. We're in Minnesota. There's a lot of Oles.
Yeah,
and a few Lenas.
Yeah. So for a while we were in polite competition to see who could get up to 10 first, and we were both at 9. And he was down in Brazil, and he spawned his 10th one, so he won that race. But again, just started collecting knowledge about him because each one is different, and that's why I was able to have such success with the different species, as I would look and find out their location, their environment. Being an engineer by background, and I always want to find as much detail as I can. the detailed approach, just paid off for me.
So, how many different species have you discovered?
I wouldn't say I've discovered any new species, but I've had a few
Identified.
Sorry?
Identified or labeled, I should put.
None officially, because I'm not, a professional. So I have to find someone in the field who can do that for me. But again, finding out that the one subgroup is its entirely new genus as opposed to the Pseudacanthicus. To my knowledge, no one else knows about that other than who I've shared that with, and I'm being a little more open about it because I'm trying to at least get the the DNA tree published somewhere, so even the hobbyists can take a look at it and see what makes sense. But the big thing I've learned a difference on is, people usually look at like an evolution or a change over time with fish. If you start off in this one area of the world, and over hundreds or thousands of years, the fish migrate to elsewhere, and then they look entirely different throughout the entire Amazon basin and into Peru and even up into Guyana and Suriname. The DNA is so similar that you can almost like mix and match and get one fish that looks like another one, and that's what's happening now. Is you've got some people who are looking at some 114s in a river outside of Manaus, and it almost looks like a scarlet. It's got beautiful red lines, blue lines, purple lines, and I've had some 600s which look like worm lines. They almost look like 333s now, just because you get 1,000 to 2,000 eggs per hatch.
Oh my God!
Just a little bit of genetic. So every time you get, I call it an odd throw. If you get 1,000 fry that hatch, usually there's one or two that are totally different.
Well, I mean, 2,000 fish. You're looking at. You're sitting there rolling the dice on something.
Yeah. Like I think if you looked in on my YouTube channel, you'll see I actually had a black and white Pseudacanthicus for about 3 months. Looked like a 46.
So just to clarify for the listeners, your YouTube channel is Pseudosmart on YouTube.
Yeah.
And just to clarify spelling on the channel, it's PSEUDA Smart. So certainly check that out on YouTube. And you said it was on another aquarium channel as well. You had another video.
I have a Facebook page with the same name.
Yes, and then you've been interviewed by some other people too that have had on their
Ted
Judy.
Yeah, Ted's Fish Room.
And Ted's Fish Room. There we go. That's what I was looking for.
Ted Judy, and Ted's been around forever and is a smart guy. And he interviewed you, and it looked like it was part of it was done in your home, and the other part of it was probably done over in your like a hotel or something, right?
Exactly.
Like at a show or something.
There's done during one of the conventions over here.
And that you had spoken at that convention, and apparently had a very good talk the way it sounded. So
we're gonna see you in the next TED Talks. Is that where it's gonna happen?
I don't know. Maybe I've got other stories to tell as well. Obviously.
Well, we want to hear them, man.
So before we get too far, you mentioned about handing off the DNA. I think you mentioned a conversation that DNA sequencing was part of your forte as well.
Well, no, it's my brother's. His degree and specialty is biochemistry, and he was a manager of a genetics lab. So it was one of those things that just provenance came into view, or circumstance where, again, someone said, "Hey, prove to me that this one's different than the other," and I'm trying to figure it out. And talking with my brother, he says, "Yeah, I'm doing this DNA testing for these other people," and then this little light bulb came on. And he thought it was crazy enough of an idea to try, and his boss thought it was a crazy enough idea to try. So
you've sequenced the DNA of Pseudacanthicus?
Yeah, we did over 100 different samples, sample fish, and we got probably 75 usable DNA sequences out of them.
Yeah, we were just going, when my wife and I were watching this, we're going, where do you go to get DNA sampling for a fish? Is it like, fishdna.com or what?
We're a very unique group of people, but we're not that connected. So you having a brother that just does that for you is literally the perfect thing.
Well, the other thing which is very odd about it is talk about cheek swabs is the traditional way of doing DNA sampling even today with the scalp, the traditional way is to use like fin clippings or skin clippings. Take a dried sample. Well, with technology advancing and stuff, that's too old and too slow and takes too much time to get results. So the just like with humans, there's the 23andMe project. They give you a mouth swab where you spit into a tube. You just take the swab, rub it inside their mouth, and enough of their skin flakes off that you gather the DNA.
So
And
have you
Go
had
ahead,
your
sorry.
own DNA sequenced?
I can't officially say that, yes or no.
Oh, okay, there you go. Yeah.
But some people would argue with saying, well, you've got a tank full of fish. How do you know that you're getting the right DNA? Well, we've done that. Proven it where we've got like 5 different Pseudacanthicus with like 3 different other species. We had a ancestris, we had a megaloancestris in there, all mixed in the tank, and we swabbed the mouths of each one, and each of them came out correctly.
So let's go through that just to walk through for listeners. I'm going to start taking DNA samples of my fish.
CSI.
I'm going to CSI this shit, right? I'm going to pull out a 2-foot Pleco out of my tank, hold him with a towel,
Angry Pleco.
and you're going to get a buddy to grab a giant cotton swab and just go around that suction cup and then put it into a DNA and me to your brother.
Pretty much that's what we used to do, yeah.
Were you drinking at the time?
Oh,
I'm
my
just
God.
curious. This sounds
Is
like-
that on YouTube?
No, people wanted me to put it on there, and I never got around to it. Honestly, I was going to do that, but then I figured it'd scare more people because it looks worse than it actually is. Once you get a cactus, once you get one of these Plecos upside down, they're sort of like a shark. After about 10 seconds, they do tend to slow down. And they'll calm down. If you put it in their mouth, a lot of them will suck on it like a lollipop.
Wow. There's a visual.
I think we need 2 videos now. 1 of you swabbing and 2 of them sucking on a lollipop. We need to see this.
Yeah.
That would be the best T-shirt of all time.
No, it's not. So, I got a quick
Go ahead.
question. How long do these fish live? I mean, you've had some of these fish for years and years and years.
I know at the Shed Aquarium they had a pair of scarlets in there which are going on 20+ years, and they're still looking strong, and they're like 2.5 feet long, foot wide. They were larger than my calf, than my leg.
So do they ever have any luck just randomly that they breed for them or not?
No, they haven't. They've set the right environmental conditions for it. It's way too cold for that particular species. Usually, like the scarlets and in the flames, 24 to 25. And again, I'm using the old names because I've been using them for so long. It's hard to remember the newly assigned names that came out like a year or 2 ago. But they like 90-degree water to spawn and 92-degree water. It's crazy when you look at where some of these streams are and some of these rivers are. I actually had one tank, I'll be honest, overheated at the 97 degrees, and I had 600 Plecos in there looking hot, but they were fine. They ate a heck of a lot of food. It wasn't until I put my hand up against the tank and my hand jumped back. Like, wait a minute, something's wrong here.
So these are not warm-blooded creatures. If you have the tank that hot, you saying they're going to eat food is an understatement. They'll chew through it because metabolism has gone through the roof.
Yeah.
So I continually pick on Jimmy because he has this curse, right? He's had a lot of different Plecos over the years, but he has a curse that he just can't breed them. Then suddenly, we'll take the same Pleco, the same, Pleco tunnel, and we'll talk about breeding. Ask more questions here in a minute. But then suddenly they just breed, and that might be the solution, Jimmy. I keep my tank hotter.
Yeah, I was just thinking that myself. I've taken some fish that I've had that won't breed for me. I give him the robs, and he calls me up 2 weeks later and goes,
No, the same day.
The same day.
The same day.
That's because
New tank and just drop a clutch.
Yeah, and that's because I fed them so well. I'm giving myself credit.
Yes, pat yourself on the back. You fed them before they went to Rob's house.
Exactly. Rob and I are neighbors.
Part of it is I've also discussed with friends. We tend to call it possibly a stress spawn, or just the change in the environment made him do it. It wasn't necessarily that it was the perfect environment. It was just such a change. So
Just
that's
like-
why. So when we say, well, if you get 2 spawns, then you've accomplished something.
See, just like me and my wife, a
first
few years
date?
ago in the car.
Nobody
It's
wants
a different
to eat.
environment.
It's a different environment.
It was at a public park. We were in the woods. What can you say?
I wish I had some really bad porn music to play as you're talking about this, but we don't want to hear about that.
I apologize, Jim.
Check out the YouTube video that he's
That's not
got.
even heard before.
So I think this is a good segue to talk about breeding. So generally,
My lord.
generally Plecos. Oh, don't worry, we played Boys to Men before on one of the other podcast clips. Got a lot of laughs. But so let's talk about the beginning. So you find a pair, and most Pleco species, how are they difficult to sex? I mean, with bristle noses, you can find that males have the long spikes, females have the shorter bits. But how do you sex normal Pseudacanthicus?
first thing most people talk about is the hairs and the spines on the males are much heavier than on the females. They call I think it's orodontal growth, which is on the pectoral fins.
So you said hair?
It's like bristle hair. It's very sharp, very pointy. And then, what I find is most reliable is the overall shape. The males tend to look like torpedoes from the top. Very, blunt head, narrow body, narrowing towards the tail. Where the female fish, because they have eggs, they tend to have a wider midsection. Sorry, but that's just the way it is. Not being sexist.
They're built for it.
Can you pick out a male from a? I mean, I understand if you have them side by side, or a group of them, but are you able just to look at a single one and pick it out?
Some species yes, others no. The scarlets and the flames, 24s and 25s. Most of those rules go out the window because I've actually had females which were more heavily, growth and thicker plates than the males. So it's some of those there's a little bit of confusion going on as to what's what, but usually, like for me, after seeing hundreds and hundreds of fry, I could sex them like 1 3/4 inches. I could pretty much sex them accurately just by looking at them.
That's not a lot of size either.
No, that is very small. When now you talk about your fry, do you sell your fry?
Yeah, I did. That's one thing also to clarify. Part of why I got involved with Ocean or Ohio Rescue was because of my condition with having Parkinson's. I finally had to let go of the day-to-day side of keeping the fish. So after looking around for a long time, because you just don't want to give your equipment to people who aren't deserving, I came across Ohio Fish Rescue and Rich and
Josh?
they seem to be very genuine and caring about it. So they basically came in, and that's why I have 2 videos with them where they're taking all of the equipment out of my house. It took them a day in a 26-foot trailer or 26-foot U-Haul to remove all of the tanks and everything that I had in my fishing that had accumulated over the years.
And yeah, Rich and Josh, we had them on last week. We had a great conversation with them. They had nothing but great things to say about you, and they were the ones that hooked us up so we could have this conversation with you. And for the people that are listening and stuff, you had to kind of downsize back in the day, or what happened?
Well, it's in part of my blogs that I've had Parkinson's for 16 years, and each year it got progressively worse and worse. So I was able to do less and less. That's why I had the automatic system set up so that it would take the workload off of me, just doing the daily stuff. But it got to the point where going down there every day got to be almost it was an impossible thing to do. And I'd seen so many people who passed away and they left their wives with 2 rooms of fish tanks, and I swore I wouldn't do that to her. So I spent a year finding the right place for all the fish that I had, because again, if there's people who want to just throw money at them, but that's not the right person to give some of these fish to. Some of those fish that I had have never been in the U.S. before, and probably won't be for a long time. So I found homes for them, with people who I thought could still get a chance of raising them and in fact breeding them. And then once I got the fish gone, except for the one pair that they're going to grow up, I then had all these tanks, and 180 or 190. That's the magic tank everyone's looking for, right?
Yep.
They're used.
Yeah, they are hard to find and used. That's for sure. You never see them very often.
Yeah, so I had 5 of them there, so with stands and everything else.
Do you have any left on hand now at home?
Nope, everything's gone. I've got some heaters and dust and some dirt piles. If anyone wants those, they're welcome to take them.
So now you sent me some pictures, and now you're getting back into local fishing.
Well, those are from before as well. I hope to get back into local fishing because I can't give everything up. Got to have some vices.
Awesome.
But those are usually charters. It takes the burden off of me to have to go out and prepare things. So I just do a couple charters a year with friends.
That's one of the best ways to do it, especially if you don't know the area. Like I've traveled, we went to Florida with Jim, and we had a fun charter, and that's really the way to go about it. It's all set up for you. They know the hot spots. You don't have to waste a day just trying to find the fish. It's a great way, and they like to drink while they were on the charter. So.
Yeah, I mean, like with Lake St. Clair, with the third DNR, they're actively working to introduce other species, for fun for the sports fishermen. And if you notice on the bottom, there was actually pink salmon that were down there. They decided, a couple of years ago, hey, let's throw them in for a few years and see how they do. So, and you can catch pink salmon or in Lake St. Clair.
So I know this is off topic, but are they breeding in Lake St. Clair?
No, they don't. You know, the old runs they had many years ago in the 80s, they had limited spawns, but they never were sustainable. So it was all introduced.
But they
through
did
the.
spawn.
Oh yeah.
That's amazing.
You know, I ended up with in the 80s I had like a 27-pound king salmon. You talk about having fun, in a freshwater lake. Come on, really.
That's incredible.
So getting back to breeding, so
Sure.
sexing we've established, but the actual process. So is there any nipping or way you're seeing their breeding, and what do you use? Because generally Plecos like to burrow or have some sort of cave to breed in. So what do you use for these larger Pseudacanthicus?
Well, I had to get real creative. For a while, I was using the clay pipe that you get from like a chimney store or your local builder. But then once they got over 4.5 inches in diameter, finding larger pipes gets to be difficulty. So I ended up finding out I would call up the art offices of a university like University of Michigan. I got a hold of the art department and found out who did large clay objects. And that's how I started getting my larger caves made.
So why do you use clay versus other material?
Like PVC.
Some people like PVC, but it doesn't breathe because if you look at, again, trying to look at the natural environment, most of these caves are dug into the side of the river, right? And so water flows through them, nutrients flow through there. So if you have PVC or if you have plastic, you basically have a dead spot. And the only circulation you get from them wagging their fins to try and move fresh air in there. And like in Europe, a lot of people would lose the female because the male would be jamming the female up into the very end of the cave. She wouldn't breathe and she'd suffocate.
So it's the female breeding as well, not just the eggs.
Right. Yeah, I mean, basically the female has to be in there to lay the male. She'll leave, then he'll go in there and he'll fertilize the egg.
So I've also heard that's a texture thing as well, that they don't like to breed, or even if they do, it doesn't bond the egg well unless it has a textured surface. Is that true?
I find unglazed, glazed, I'd say that's true. Unglazed, a moderate surface they like. Too rough, it cuts these eggs. Too smooth, they can't get enough of a grip.
And that's glazed on the PVC is what you're talking about, correct?
No, I'm talking about on the pots, the clay pots.
Gotcha.
So they glaze the pots, which make it kind of like a hard varnish on it, which is it's too smooth then.
Yeah, I don't buy a lot of pot.
Yeah.
By listening to this podcast, people will probably argue that whole concept about that.
Hey man, that's not nice.
Yeah, so again, it seals the hole, and there's not a lot of movement, and so if that becomes an advantage there. And then also the other humorous part is these fish have to learn how to spawn. And so what they do is the cave size is critical because the male has to be able to hold the female in place, and then so then they can figure out how what makes basically she has to be put into the mood to make for the transition to start developing the eggs and then hatching or expelling the eggs. They have to learn how the whole process works. And it sounds crazy, but the first time it'll take like 5, 6, 7 days. And they'll get frustrated, and then if the cave's wrong shape or wrong size, he can't use his fins to hold her in the right place. And I mean, the scouts took I think like 7 caves before they finally got the right cave that they figured it all out. And then you get to the second spawn, and it only maybe takes 4 or 5 days. And then I've had some of my older fish. I had my 600 pair. They were spawning for 10 years. They would be done in like 3 hours. They look at each other, go in the cave 3 hours. They have eggs.
So what size cave do you recommend for the size Pleco? So if you have, say, let's make something up, a 10-inch Pleco, what size cave entrance and length are you looking for?
You need to have the depth about 1 inch to 2 inches deeper than the length of the fish. So you'd be like 11 or 12 inches. And then the height and the width, it depends upon, if you look at the male, if his dorsal fin is totally erect, totally up, you want it to only be like 75% up. So let's say if his tip of his fin is 3 inches tall, you'd want like 2.5 inches for this height of the cave. That way he can use it to wedge against. And the same thing with the pectoral fins. You don't want the pectoral fins all the way open, but you want them like 70% open.
So he can get some grip in there, so he can kind of hold everything down. That makes total sense. And who thinks about these things but people like yourself? I mean,
it takes hours of watching. I mean, you just literally have to look at it, and it just people said I was insane, and like, well, that's just the way I solve problems for my life and as a career. The impossible ones, and then you got to look at all the little details.
So when you went to the art department and asked them to make you these caves, did they look at you going, "What are you talking
Well,
about?"
I show them the pretty pictures. They go, "Oh, look at the pretty fish," and then it's a whole different story.
So then they stepped up and helped you out.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I know you can go out and buy professional caves that are made by cave people, but they're not cheap. I mean, I bought some small ones that I've paid $15 for wholesale. And yours are the size of a man's arm for the most part.
Yeah, some of them I was paying like $40 for because again, if you don't get the right size cave, you don't get them to spawn.
Right, and it's just frugal to spend all that time if you can't get a good spawn from those guys.
All right, so now the spawns happened, and generally the male is the one to take care of the eggs, no matter the breed, correct?
Yeah. Actually, let me pick up one thing on the spawns. I will give. If people say I never give any information, here's one of my top secret pieces of cave making information that no one ever knew about.
Secret time.
Secret time.
Secret time.
No one ever asked what is the material you use. What is the raw material you're using to make the cave?
What is that?
There's different types of clay.
I thought it was just potter's clay, and they just gave you what they gave you.
I'm just getting a scene in my head from Ghost when Demi Moore and Patrick Swayze are making, the pottery, with the romantic music.
You're going to go for a while soon, and then come back after a while, or anyway.
That was a hot scene.
That was a hot scene.
All right, secret time.
Secret time.
Okay. There's a special group of people who are insane with their plants. They're orchid growers, orchid breeders.
Yep.
The clay they use is highly permeable. You can actually take water and pour it into an orchid pot, and within about 2 seconds, it'll start dripping out the bottom, or it will go through the material.
That sounds like a bad pot.
So it's breathable.
Breathable, because again, orchids are mainly air plants. They're up in the trees. They're not buried in the heavy dirt. You need to have a breathable clay for these pots to give you so you have more oxygen transfer. That's my big secret. I'm actually getting water flow, nutrient flow through the porosity of the caves.
So it's a balance between making sure it's breathable while making sure it's still completely dark.
Right. Well, trust me, breathable does that mean like you almost have holes that you can see through them? It's just a totally different density clay material. That's
incredible. We started this podcast a few months ago, and the things we wanted to do is, this is when somebody's successful, they don't want to share secrets. And, we had Steve Rubicki on here from Angels Plus. He shared secrets. Rich and those guys are sharing secrets. And what we want to do is we want to see people succeed in this hobby. We want to see people succeed. And it's just invaluable to know these things. It's just incredible. And I want to thank you for sharing that with us.
I know the big two things I learned about breeding today are, number one, the type of pots, how the whole process works about holding, and then just the craze of keeping it hot when you're breeding.
Keeping it hot, yeah.
Keeping it hot.
Yeah. So again, going along the things of the secrets, a lot of what I find with these secrets is they're not. There's other secrets that you still don't tell, and like where I'm going with that is.
Well, that's how we get you back on the podcast.
Yeah, Charlie Mueller. Basically 6 years ago, he really was interested in learning about Pseudacanthicus, and he basically was my understudy. Everything I learned about him, I trusted him, and he's the one who got like 75% of my fish, my breeders, because he's been able to successfully start breeding them. But the thing of it was I wouldn't tell him exactly how to do it, because I knew if I told him exactly how to do it, it wouldn't work. And it's taken us 6 years to learn that. What I see as keys you must do are not necessarily the same thing. And for example, mine would always breed in 85 to 86 degree water. He had a pair that he was tired of spawning, so he turned his tank down to 80. They spawn in 80 degree water. And I never could get them to do that. So the big thing is pay attention. You have to look and see what the fish are. If they're happy, you know when they're happy. And you just can't follow a textbook with a Pseudacanthicus anyway. You can't follow a checklist or a textbook of this is how you do it. So, you can move the cave 2 inches and change the water flow in the aquarium, and they will spawn or they won't.
It's a practice, not something that's completely guaranteed.
Exactly.
Yeah, and just because it works for you doesn't mean it's going to work for me.
Right. That's why it works at my house and not yours, Jimmy.
Right. Well,
right.
You look at people like Steve Rubicki from Angels Plus, and he says, these are bred in my tank. Doesn't mean they're going to breed in your tank, but I'm selling them to you as breeder fish. And, if they get to my house, they don't like my water, or my pH is too high, or they don't like my tank, or it's in a high traffic area, it just makes a world of difference compared to what other people have kept them at.
Yeah.
So now, again, they've spawned, the male's taking care of them, and how long is the gestation period between fertilization and hatch?
Typically, for pseudos, it's 7-8 days to have them hatch out. So you've got basically eggs with tails, and then around 15 day 16 is when I would collect them, because they're not quite free swimming. They still have a good sized yolk sac to them, so you can catch them. But if you wait for them, I've actually left them in there to see how long it takes. Usually it's about 40-45 days before the male lets them all out, and then you're down to maybe like 20 out of 500 because they all sneak out and they die or whatever, because he's got to go and get a meal somewhere. And so,
is it important that you get them out with the egg yolk sac still attached, and then that way are you able to watch when that's absorbed, so when you know when to start feeding them?
Oh yeah, I mean, part of it is it's just easier to catch them.
Oh.
If you wait till they start scattering in the tank, you'll kill half of them trying to get them off the glass or trying to get them out of the caves or whatever. Okay. So it's just a very convenient time frame. The male gets frustrated, so he's about ready to give up on them anyway, and they're all in one spot. So
do you just try to get him to scoot out of the cave, and you grab the cave and bring it up and dump the fish out?
Well, actually, if you look on my Facebook page, I took a video of how to collect them in 30 seconds or whatever.
Yeah, I saw that. That's why I was baiting you.
Yep, that's exactly it. So sometimes you get lucky. Sometimes they're tired of them. I'll grab a cave, and the male will just jump out and go, "Okay, your turn. You take care of them now." Other ones, fiercely defend them, and that's where I came up with the idea of having a screen over the tank, and then the male slides off the screen into the tank, and then the fry fall underneath into a tote.
And so, who is your lovely assistant that was helping you? Was that your wife?
Yep.
Does she have a great interest in this, or does she just help you out?
She has other interests, but she thought it was kind of neat just to see them breed them, see them spawn, and I have to give her credit. She had the first 3 pseudo spawns because I was always fiddling with them too much. So I went to Brazil for 3 weeks. She took care of them and came back, and they had spawned, and there were babies swimming in the tank.
So you're saying that she's the expert and you're not?
Well, she just ignored them more than I did.
Oh, there we go. And that's how my kids officially became adults. I just ignored them until they were old enough to talk.
Man, poor Kyle.
Yeah,
poor Kyle.
I have 2 adult children who are actually friends with Robbie also, and we have a lot of parenting to do.
So we have a plan. Jimmy, as punishment when his kids grew up, he made them cup betas. So he's got to have all the betas he can possible when he babysits his grandchildren. Yeah.
When my kids were younger, I used to do a lot of wholesaling, and during the betta craze, we'd have 300 to 600 bettas, and when the kids were bad, they were made to cup bettas from the little bags. And my son now, who's 28, was over the other night, saw all the bettas, and he goes, "I'm out of here." That's the first thing he said.
So, Jim, like a few more questions. For beginners, what's a Pseudacanthicus, maybe 1 or 2 breeds that you recommend for people that are trying to start and getting into this type of fish?
Probably the 160s are called a polka dot. They're more of a basic looking one. They're like black with white spots. They're pretty straightforward, and they're not very difficult to spawn. And then after that, maybe actually even 114s aren't that bad if you have good water quality. The big thing is the water quality in the currents for the tank. That's what the big things are.
And how many fry do you get out of those type of fish?
For the polka dot.
If you have like about a 5-inch fish, you may get 200 down or 50, between like 50 and 200.
That's incredible. Because Adam loves the zebra Plecos so much, the L46s, and those only have 12, 14, 8.
I've even seen the 6.
Yeah, and is that part of the reason that they're so darn expensive?
Yeah, I mean, there's literally thousands of people who have pairs, but again, when you can't get more than 12 or 15 at a time, yeah, definitely the demand can be, you can be unsatisfied. That's for sure.
When I started in the business, I was able to get zebra plecos for about $30, and I remember at the time thinking, "Holy God, these things were so expensive." And now, a wholesale price runs $120 to $150. I see them retail up to $200, and people just they want that fish, and I had one guy that ordered 4 of them, and he ended up with 1 pair out of the 4, ended up with 1 spawn, and he was excited. But man, he had a lot of money invested in those few fish.
Yeah.
So I won't be able to, leave without my listeners harassing me and asking you, what are some of the most colorful varieties you've ever seen?
I mean, just in general, or
Yeah.
Because you breed the cactus ones, and those are gorgeous.
yeah. I mean, discus. Obviously, discus floored me the first time I did those. I just even when they're small, how gorgeous they are. Doing the blue diamonds back when they first came out.
Oh, I meant of Plecos.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of. There's the. I'm trying to think what genus they are, but like the 397s and the like the ones with the bright oranges and the grays, and there's so many that so there's a lot that I like. I just can't think of the.
Well, one of my favorites
numbers.
is on your website. It's an L237 red Titanic Pleco, and you can look up red Titanic Pleco on Google versus your video that you put up 5 years ago, and it's absolute night and day.
Yep.
Is that because of diet?
Diet and location of where it was collected from.
So if you grab a fish from one river to the next, it could be a huge difference in the quality and the color.
Yes.
Interesting.
So on the 2 rarest Pseudacanthicus that you've ever had.
One would be the Titanic, which is the LDA 105.
You said LDA 15?
LDA 105, yeah. That's one that is like the orange spots and black. And then, to be honest, I got it from a friend of mine at about 3-4 inches. I wasn't very impressed when I got to like 10 inches. Man, the color just got fantastic, and they started really looking very pretty. And then the other expensive one was the serratus back because, again, no one had pulled them out of Cyrano for so many years, and those go from like jet black to with black with white spots, so they're kind of a really unique one as well.
And what L is that?
There is no L for it because it's called a serratus. It would be go to Plant Catfish. It would be Pseudacanthicus serratus, and I don't think they ever assigned an L number for it because it was described before the L number system came into existence.
There you go. Well, Jim, you also had mentioned that you have some stories. What stories were missing?
Let's see. Well, actually, I think I'll leave stories for another time. But some of the stuff that I think people might be interested to know that we're still working on with Charlie Mueller is I found one substrain of the Pseudacanthicus. I call it the 007. It's a 114 variant, but they only grow to 5 inches max length. And I don't know why this particular group that I had were all small, all short, but I had 6 came in from the wild. They never grew over 6 inches, and then the first offspring I had only grew to 5-6 inches. So we're trying to establish that as a major line because I think that'd be fantastic for the hobby to have a pseudo that stops at max growth of 5 inches. So then you can use a 50-gallon, and they'll have no trouble staying in a 50-gallon.
That would be beautiful. So I have one question that comes from some of the people we've been ordering bristlenose from. Apparently some farmers in Florida are having issues currently, and they've been investing a lot of money working with veterinarians of certain strains of bristlenose Plecos that when they breed, they're either extremely slow grow or won't grow past 2 inches, at least not in a decent enough time. What if you're having issues with slow grow? What do you recommend to try to do to, number one, it sounds like water changes, but what other things do you recommend?
Check the temperature and then also the quality of the food, and then other things like crowding. How many fish are in the tank. That also affects how fast they grow.
I have heard in the past. Now that you say that, I had somebody that was breeding guinea pigs, of all things, which aren't fish related at all. But when I used to sell to pet stores, and all of a sudden, their guinea pig production went way down. And they started losing them, and they started having some problems. And what they found out is that they changed the formula of the food, and there was no vitamin C, or not enough vitamin C in the food, and it was basically giving them kind of like scurvy sort of thing. And so, when these companies change food chemistry or the way they've been doing it, just like making dog food, I would imagine that can greatly affect how fast it grows.
Yeah, I had a pair of turquoise discus, breeding pair. They would spawn every 3 weeks in the common aquarium, and I had these. So they were like the soft chews. They were like they were brine or crow, soft chews. I don't remember who made them because they pulled off the market. But, every 3 weeks they'd spawn, no problem. And they stopped making this food, and they never spawned again after that.
So by taking away their favorite food, they said, "I'm out of here. I'm not doing this anymore."
Yeah.
Just like me, take away my cheeseburgers and suddenly I'm going to cry in the corner. Well, Jim, I appreciate your time. We've definitely exhausted over an hour here with you, and we want to have you on for another podcast. And maybe we can talk more about those secret stories you want to tell us next time.
Okay.
For the listeners, we're just going to let you know that if you have questions for Jim for next episode, or if you have something you want to send us to it directly, go to aquariumguyspodcast.com. On the bottom of the website, we either have our telephone number, and you can leave us a voicemail, or we can air on the podcast live, or just send us a direct email right on the bottom of the page, and we'd be happy to get that directly to Jim. Otherwise, certainly check out Pseudosmart on YouTube and Facebook.
And Jim, are you selling fish currently right now?
No, like I said, I actually have 0 fish in my basement right now.
Okay. Well,
I wish I did, but unfortunately I don't.
Yeah. Well, that's one of the first questions we get from people is where can I get his stuff? And it's just good to know that you've had to downsize because of health complications and stuff, and that's totally understandable. But I just want to thank you so much from the bottom of my heart for all the information you've given us and the time. It's greatly appreciated.
He's going to go home and turn up the temp on his tanks.
Well, that'd be good if that's all you need. That'd be great. And again, there are people who have my breeders, and rather than speak for them, I'm hoping that they'll be sprouting up here in the next 6 months with, hey, I've got some of these fish for sale. That's what I'm really hoping, but I'm not gonna go speaking for them, and when I don't know how they're.
Well, when that happens, you let us know. We're going to put the word out. We're going to help out. We're here to help the entire aquarium industry. We want people to succeed.
So
that sounds good.
Some reminders, please share this with your friends. We want more people listening in, and then subscribe in your favorite platform. But please give us a call. We love your communication on our email or voicemails. We've been getting a lot in. And just one more reminder, transshippers, please contact us. Apparently there's a lot of people looking for you, and there's not a lot of ways for them to find you. So let us know, and thanks again, guys. We will see you on the next podcast. Let's kick that outro.
Thanks, guys, for listening to this podcast. Please visit us at aquariumguyspodcast.com and listen to us on Spotify, iHeartRadio, iTunes, and anywhere you can listen to podcasts.
We're practically everywhere. We're on Google. I mean, just go to your favorite place. Pocket Casts. Subscribe to make sure it gets push notifications directly to your phone. Otherwise, Jim will be crying into sleep.
Can I listen to it in my treehouse?
In your treehouse, in your fish room, even alone at work.
What about at my man cave?
Especially your man cave.
Yeah.
Only if Adam's there.
No.
With feeder guppies.
No.
They're endless.
You midget-loving, sucking motherfucker.
Well, I guess we'll see you next time. Later.